stars out there on the market, and the Nets can go shopping elsewhere. So I just think that the Rockets are willing to let the bidding war go on James Harden, who, by the way, despite all of his issues, is off to a terrific start, despite not being in great shape. And I just don't think the Nets have it. I think it would take them to make a separate deal to juice their package. And so while I understand it's still on the board and I can't rule it out, I just don't see that as a trade match.
We're talking to Brian Windhorst, ESPN senior NBA writer. So, Brian, yesterday we saw Ja Morant go down with an injury. I saw reports indicated that he left on a wheelchair. What's the latest with Ja?
Yeah, so they're going to have an MRI today. The real question is, what is the degree level of this ankle sprain? If it is a second-degree sprain, it's going to be weeks. If it's a third-degree sprain, which is, almost the worst thing you can have other than a broken ankle, it could be, a couple of months. And that's what they're going to determine with this MRI. The scary thing about this injury, he was challenging a shot. He had, he's got an electric leaping ability. He had jumped so high on this play, and so he came crashing down. So the hope is that it's just going to be something that is, keeps him out, maybe a couple of weeks. But the velocity at which he went down is rough, and that's a Grizzlies team that is already missing Jaren Jackson, who's their second best player, for an undetermined amount of time as he recovers from knee surgery. And with where the Western Conference is and how tightly packed it is, you lose your best player like Ja Morant. You lose him for 3-4 weeks without Jaren Jackson. In a 72-game season, it might be unrecoverable for this Grizzlies team, and that would be unfortunate, but also the reality.
Wendy, it's scary to think, as they're the reigning champs, the LA Lakers, LeBron and AD led. Is it possible to say they are not only better, but significantly better this season?
Well, they're different, and different in good ways and bad ways. They changed their team quite a bit, and especially at the center position. Last year they had really high athlete, rim protecting, basket, glass cleaning centers in JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard. And I know that those guys weren't core parts of their star roster, but those guys really defined how they played, especially defensively. And now they have Montrezl Harrell, who is not a strong defender. In fact, last night in the game against Portland, the Blazers' whole attack down the stretch of that game was to attack Montrezl Harrell, and it helped them win that game. And then Marc Gasol, who's one of the shrewdest and smartest defenders out there, former Defensive Player of the Year, but doesn't move like that. So I still think they're going to be a very good defensive team, but they're different. And then on the perimeter, with introducing Dennis Schroeder and introducing the way they run their offense, so they're trying to run their offense more through Marc Gasol, that means less playmaking a little bit for LeBron James, which, again, could be a good thing to take some pressure off him, but is different. So you look at the Lakers, you see depth. You definitely see a great chance for them to repeat, but it would not surprise me if over the first couple of months of the season, we see some choppy play from them, because they do have to alter just the way that they go about in their attack.
Okay, let's go back to James Harden really quick, Wendy, for a second. So we saw the other day Daryl Morey send out a tweet about James Harden. Obviously, Daryl Morey is now the general manager for the 76ers, so this was a little bit confusing. So I ask you, does this mean that the 76ers are now talking to James Harden and that's what was top of his mind, or Daryl Morey just needs someone to help him with his social media?
I mean, Daryl Morey is a smart guy. That was not a smart move. That was instantaneously like, what are you doing? And the Rockets were pissed off about it, and rightly so. And the league slapped him for it, because even though it may seem innocuous, there's a lot of tension there. I mean, just the concept of having a negotiation over a star player, especially when it lasts over a long period of time, that's difficult. Then you introduce the fact that Daryl Morey has just left that team. It's pretty much a 1 in a million situation. I can't remember in almost 20 years of covering the NBA where there's been this type of negotiation from a guy that just changed general managers, just changed front offices. It's unheard of. So everybody's a little bit jumpy about it. It doesn't mean that the talks are any different. There have been offers swapped between the teams, and they're not satisfactory right now. And I would say, sitting here in late December, that if I had to make a wager on which team had the most likely chance of landing James Harden, I would say it would be the Sixers eventually. And mostly that's because they've been willing to talk about Ben Simmons. And I just don't think the Rockets are going to do better for a talent return from Ben Simmons. But I also am going to point something else out. Right now, the NBA has a very bloated middle class. The difference separating the teams that you'd rank from maybe the fourth best team in the league to about the 15th best team in the league are negligible. And when you have a guy like James Harden out there and a whole bunch of teams in there trying to figure out how they can distance themselves from the pack, and overall that means there's not that many sellers, and it's a seller's market for trades in general, I expect there to be a team or two to say, you know what? We think that we can make a move this year if we go for James Harden. And I would even argue that the biggest X factor in this season is where James Harden ends up. And so with that out there on the table and that uncertainty, I just don't know where he's going to go, even though I think Philly eventually, if they're willing to keep Simmons in there, has a compelling offer.
No doubt. All right, Brian Windhorst, ESPN NBA insider. Thank you for the insight. We appreciate it. Happy New Year to you. We'll catch up with you soon.
You too.
See ya. So, Dwayne Haskins is the latest in a long line of Ohio State quarterbacks to have issues or fail in the NFL. We're going to ask a former Buckeye why that is. That's next. You're listening to Keyshawn, J. Will, and Zubin on ESPN Radio and ESPN News.
From Keyshawn, J. Will, and Zubin.
Ohio State ain't no bigger than USC. We on the same level, if not better.